Evening. Thanks for joining us. First Lady Dr. Jill Biden concludes her visit to Green Bay today.
Action 2 News team standing by with all the details. Our team coverage begins at Austin Straubel International Airport, where Emily Riley is live to show us who greeted the First Lady on the tarmac. Emily.
Bill and Cammie, well, First Lady Jill Biden has now wrapped up her roundtable. Community and state leaders were there to give her a warm welcome when she arrived to the area. You can see lined up outside of the plane welcoming her to Green Bay included Governor Tony Evers, First Lady of Wisconsin Cathy Evers, Brown County Executive Troy Streckenbach, and Oneida Nation Chairman Tahasi Hill. This was the First Lady's third trip to Wisconsin since August. And just 3 weeks ago, President Biden made a stop in Wisconsin where he underlined Wisconsin's significance as a crucial state in the upcoming election. For details about the First Lady's visit to downtown Green Bay, Jason Zimmerman joins us live from the Rail Yard District. Jason.
Emily, the event here at the X Innovation Center lasted roughly an hour with the First Lady speaking along with the U.S. Education Secretary and Governor Tony Evers. Now, during the roundtable portion of the event, the First Lady heard from students from both Preble and Mishigat high schools, plus a member of the Oneida tribe. She's been traveling the country to promote her husband's education initiatives. Some of this includes unconventional learning opportunities like apprenticeships outside the classroom with local businesses. According to the First Lady, Wisconsin has been among the leaders in this category, and she is hoping to expand it moving forward.
We want other parts of this state and the country to follow your example. So you elected my husband, President Biden, because he wanted to rebuild the middle class. But what does that look like, and how do you do it? It looks like what's happening here.
And the First Lady also shared some of her own personal experiences in the classroom with helping students pick their career path. And she even asked a few questions to some of the lucky kids who are on this panel today. Reporting live in Green Bay, Jason Zimmerman, Action 2 News.
Jason, thank you. The Republican Party of Wisconsin held a conference today on the First Lady's visit. The Wisconsin GOP Chairman Brian Schimming says the First Lady is visiting the state to defend a, quote, second-class administration because the president's policies are failing workers and students here in Wisconsin. Schimming also claims Americans have low confidence in the Biden administration's work on the nation's economy.
You have 64% of Americans saying they have little or no confidence in Joe Biden when it comes to the economy. Only 36% of the voters see Joe Biden's economic record favorably. And in the last poll, the big national poll that was out, voters overwhelmingly trust Republicans more than Democrats on inflation by about 15 points and on the economy by over 10 points.
Schimming goes on to predict that Wisconsin will see more state events by the Biden administration in the lead up to the November election, saying, quoting now, they're here because they're in trouble, end quote.